serious, what is the worst thing that has ever happened to you? Story 1, losing my 2-year-old daughter to a drunk driver, my mom, and having to pull her off life support. Then watching my mom get sentenced to second-degree murder. Story 2, probably being born, my mom and dad had another loud argument about his partying, and she was 7 months pregnant with me. She found a loaded .22 in a gym bag my dad had. She sat in a rocking chair, first put the gun in her head, then put on her stomach, and pulled the trigger. The bullet tore through her abdomen, striking me on the right side. She was rushed to the hospital. Thankfully, one of her girlfriends found her and called 911, where they did an emergency C-section to get me out. They were so sure I wasn't going to make it, they brought in a priest to give me my last rites right then and there in the ICU. I ended up having to have a foot of small intestine removed due to gas gangrene, my right leg surgically reset, a colostomy put in while my intestines healed, a feeding tube through my right pectoral muscle because my throat was too small, and developed both asthma and am legally blind in my left eye. Plus, they kept me in an incubator for weeks with ultraviolet light beaming down on me 247 and had to have a massive blood transfusion, but I pulled through and the rest is history. Also, my mom not only ended up trying to commit suicide again by downing a bunch of pills a few weeks later, but ended up leaving me when I was 4 and never looked back. Oh well. Story 3, I posted this before. Decided to post again. Please, no gold this time. Met a girl when I was 25. She was 22, dated for 3 years, and eventually got married. She was a very wonderful person, and I couldn't ask for a better girlfriend. While we were planning a wedding, she mentioned that her ex-boyfriend offered to DJ for free. They dated for 3 years when she was 15, 18, and it was a clean breakup. He was also married, so I really didn't have a problem with it. I mean, free DJ service. So we get married and go to the reception. Everyone is having a grand time. I was talking with a buddy of mine, and in the corner of my eye, I see the DJ ex-boyfriend staring at something. I look over, and he's staring at my wife, who looked amazing, and my wife was staring back at him. I continued to talk to my buddy, but kept an eye on them. She was across the room, but they smiled at each other, and she started looking around the room probably for me. But I was pretty well hidden. My wife walked towards the bathroom area, and the DJ asked his assistant to take over and started walking in the same direction. I started to panic inside. I excused myself and walked in the direction. Couldn't find either one. There were 3 bathrooms, one for men, one for women, and a family bathroom that locked inside. I went into the men's room. No one there. I waited for a few minutes, and the family bathroom opened up, and my wife saw me and tried to get me to go dance, but I wasn't budging. The guy eventually came out a few minutes later, and my wife swore up and down that he was just helping her with her dress. I left. She called my phone and again swore that nothing happened. We talked about it the next day, but I couldn't grasp why she would need him, of all people, to help with that sort of thing. I was able to get an annulment. I never remarried. Story 4, had throat cancer, a 4 cm x 4 cm x 3 cm tumor from tonsil up the tongue. Had all my teeth removed with local anesthetic. It took 2 sessions, then the real fun started. Had to shave off my 20-year-old goatee, a couple of more tests and scans, PET, MRI, type things, then 35 hits of radiation and 3 lots of high-dose chemo. Went from December 17th to February 8th. Every business day, I was strapped into a face-hugging mask, that tight you couldn't blink, for about 20 minutes. Went from 70 kilograms to 53 kilograms, feeding tube, sick as a dog when it was over for 3 weeks after, would have slept 18 hours a day, sick as a dog for 2 months, but I'm lucky enough to be Australian. There were 0 hospital bills, even though I saw 2 specialists, a dietitian, a speech pathologist, etc., every week, and a perfect cure. We have the world's best cancer doctors and nurses, all good now. Story 5, it didn't as much happen to me as I was just the victim of insane timing. In college, I was on my cell phone with my old man, just catching up and talking about my classes. He's on the house phone. My folks to this day still do the talk to each other while on the phone thing. I don't know. Anyway, I hear her cell phone ringing, and my dad is like, "Hey, it's your phone." And she picks up the phone, and I hear her gasp. So now I'm on the phone with my dad, but he's talking to my mom, who's also on the phone. What? No, what do you mean hospital? So much coffee. I got to call you back. Your sister was raped. He hung up, and I find myself standing in the quad, just like, well, then at the time I thought that'd be pretty bad, but there would be worse still related to the whole situation. I've never felt so helpless in my life, but even right as it happens, you feel kind of ridiculous making it in any way about yourself. My sister was in the hospital, after all, but my heart also broke for my father, of course. The next worst thing would be weeks later. Of course, my home life is a mess. My sister, while basically all right, was having a hard time finding normal again, and my folks were bringing her back and forth to courthouses and lawyering up and all this. Surprising to perhaps nobody, a college campus assault was a hard case to make, so it proceeded poorly. One night they got home around 7, and my dad disappeared in the funny one, and so my mom pleaded with me to find him and cheer him up. Awesome. I go outside, and he wasn't hard to find, but it still sucked. He was sitting in the back of his pickup, drinking a whiskey and ginger and sobbing. I don't really remember how I broke the ice, but I made some stupid joke and sat down on the tailgate. You know, there's seats inside or something terrible. He was embarrassed to be crying, but I said, it's hard for you two, man. What's up? And he talked about how Head failed as a father and how it was ultimately his fault. My sister and my folks always had a hard relationship. She was a tough kid. So, I sat there making jokes. Well, hey, I didn't turn out that retarded, did I? And letting him vent. And so, yeah, it took years to get back to normal. My sister had her day in court. We're sort of a cringe humor family to my mom's horror. And the way my sister puts it, he got off. Again, yeah, it took me a while to be able to laugh at that one. She never went back to that college or any. She gained a ton of weight and was in therapy for years, but she turned it around. She's married now and lost all the weight and is doing well. But yeah, hearing my parents find out that their daughter had been raped in real time was a pretty unexpected life event. The tone of their voices was just, man, I'll never forget it. Story 6, I was 7 years old. 7-year-old me was so excited to finally walk our family dog all by myself. Our dog was a Cairn Terrier picture Toto from Wizard of Oz. We live in a very safe, friendly neighborhood. I did a quick walk around the neighborhood and was almost home. I could see my family outside of my house in the distance. All of a sudden, a beast of a dog crashed through a screen door of a nearby house and charged at us. My dog and I both stood still in shock. This dog was on a mission. It picked up my helpless dog and threw it around, taking chunks out of it. It tossed it around like a chew toy as I screamed for help. This seemed to all be happening in slow motion. My family came running down the street, and nearby cars stopped to watch the midday massacre. One stranger got out of his car and opened his trunk. He retrieved a 9-iron golf club and swung as hard as he could at the attacker, but it wasn't phased. My dad arrived and kicked the Rottweiler in the ribcage with steel-toe boots as hard as he could, but it would not release his death grip. Finally, the owners of the dog came outside and got control of their dog. My dog was still alive, but looked defeated. It walked away in a dazed state with his tail between his legs, as if he felt like he let us down. My mother grabbed our dog and hopped in the car to rush to the vet. Unfortunately, our family dog of 7 years died on the way while wrapped in a blanket licking my mother's hand. I'm a 24-year-old grown man now, and I am and always will be weary around larger dogs. From what I've read, when a dog is in instinctive attack mode, it will go for the smallest target. I like to believe that my dog saved my life that day, as I would have been the smallest target had he not been there with me. Edit for everyone wondering what happened to the Rot. It was sent away and was not put down. The owners of the Rot bought us a brand new puppy, same breed, and believe it or not, it was the victim of a hit and run right outside my house just 2 months later. Needless to say, my family hasn't had much luck with dogs, and I haven't had one since. Story 7 so far. The worst thing that has ever happened to me was probably the day my brother had gone missing. My brother had gone missing for a few years. When he didn't show up for a court hearing, my brother had many personal demons in his life, from depression to paranoia to even addiction. My dad searched far and wide for him, and I had gone on a few trips with my dad to find my brother. The only clue my dad ever found was in a wooded area in the north end of the city that my brother was living in. It was in there that my dad found a spot in the woods with some of my brother's items, like clothes, shoes, a cell phone, and backpacks. My brother even dug a little hole in the ground under a tree, and it had some sleeping bags under it. My brother had some training in the forces, so he knew what he was doing. They found his remains not too long ago. They were found only a few meters away from where his campsite was in the woods. The cause of death was a fractured skull from a fall, and there was no foul play suspected. It was a clean fracture. My dad has been devastated and heartbroken ever since. Story 8 discovered my ex-wife planned a divorce and began an affair while I was flying combat missions in and around Iraq during the Gulf War. She told me during the drive home after we landed at our home base to a hero's welcome, complete with a band and happy families reuniting with their loved ones. I knew something was wrong when I saw her there alone without my 3 little girls. She allowed me to visit with my daughters for an hour, then left me to spend the worst night of my life in our then empty house. Edit, thanks for all the emotional support. Reddit proves my belief that people are basically good each and every day. These events occurred a long time ago, 1991. So the pain has long since become pity for the ex explained below. To clarify, I was not a pilot. I was a boom operator on the KC-135, the guy who refuels other planes in flight. We were based out of Riyadh supporting almost exclusively the F-117 Nighthawks. The ex suffered some sort of mental breakdown while I was gone. I knew she had suffered some severe traumas as a child, but during our 7-year marriage, she had never fully opened up to me or anyone else part of the problem, I'm sure. So I never got the full story. Shame on me for believing I could be a knight in shining armor and bring happiness to a fundamentally unhappy person. I was stationed in CA at the time, whose courts were very biased against men when it came to custody cases, especially military men who might have to deploy on a moment's notice, something her lawyer rode very hard during the custody hearings. Long story short, she got custody, then promptly took the kids out of state across the country. In fact, my contact with them was sporadic at best for the next several years. My military income was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it was a good stable paycheck that allowed me to send a sizable sum in child support each month. On the other, after covering the child support, I had to scrimp and save every penny to accumulate enough to travel across the country to visit the girls. I actually went back to living in the barracks for the first year following the divorce. The ex never made an effort to work through her issues, and I believe our divorce was simply another escape attempt from the deep emotional problems she was constantly running from. Our kids, unfortunately, were caught in the middle of her nightmare. I'll never understand why she put so much effort into getting custody, but she did. Eventually, her demons caught up to her. She spent the years following our divorce in and out of one bad relationship marriage after another. I believe to date, she has been married, divorced 6 times. She became deeply involved in drug and alcohol abuse. One day, years later, she went over the edge. She abandoned the girls and left town with a guy she met who worked for a traveling carnival. She left the girls only a note, telling them to call me to come and get them. My oldest daughter had already moved out of her mom's by that point. She was living with one of her high school teachers while she finished her senior year. I thought the reason she didn't want to come live with me was because she didn't want to finish high school in a new town. I found out later it was because her mother had filled her head with all sorts of crazy lies about me, and she was afraid of me. Same goes for the 2 younger ones. They were terrified when I went to pick them up. I never knew how bad their lives had become because the ex told them never to talk with me about what was going on, or they would have to come and live with me, someone they viewed as an ogre by that point. I wish I had been more nosy. Sadly, the ex has still not exorcised her demons. 2 of my girls no longer speak with her, and the third only does so out of a sense of obligation. To this day, I still don't know why she did what she did. I can only speculate. If that experience taught me anything, it taught me to live with the fact that sometimes, when dealing with other people, you never get to know the reason why. There is a happy ending for me and the girls, at least over time. My daughters and I learned the truth about each other. They learned that, like all people, I'm by no means perfect, but neither am I the ogre of their mother's lies. I eventually remarried, and have been blissfully well, as blissful as possible, married to the same fantastic woman for over 20 years. My wife legally adopted my girls, so they now have a mom who loves and cares deeply about them. They are grown now, with families of their own. I have 3 beautiful grandchildren I spend as much time as possible with, and another on the way early next year, so life is good. Edit part 2, thank you for the gilding. Story 9, I always mention this, but it is the single most significant thing that has happened in my life, so I feel it is always relevant. When I was 14, my mom collapsed at home after having a brain hemorrhage. She never came home from the hospital and died 4 months later. I wish I never had to see her like that in hospital. My mom was my everything. I adored her. She forgot who I was, couldn't talk properly after they removed part of her brain, and couldn't function at all. I hated seeing her like that, struggling to feed herself, and part of me is glad she never had to come home and live with people taking care of her for the rest of her life. She would have hated that so much. The other part of me misses her mummy very much and would give anything to have one more hug and tell her I love her. Once she was gone, our already precarious family situation turned 100 times worse. Lots of history of abuse from my brother and dad, and things went to 14 years later, I am doing okay and the glue that holds us all together. Other bad has happened, but losing mom tops everything. Edit, it breaks my heart that so many of you have had to go through this. My thoughts are with each and every one of you who have lost your mummies or important people in your lives. Huge hugs to all. XX. Story 10. When I was 12, 4 years ago, the house I was living in burned down to about half. I was living at the very top, and my mom saved my life because she heard some guys screaming outside. It was in the middle of the night. Took about an hour until the firefighters finally rescued us. This was a horrible period of time. I actually thought I was going to die since our balcony is on the back side of the house, and the entrance to get there was really hidden. You had to drive around the house and carry a heavy 10 m high ladder, another 50 m to get to us. They also rescued the other people first since they were way easier to reach. The event was in the news, by the way. When we were rescued, I was separate from my mom because there wasn't enough space for my mom and me to get a room in the hospital together. As a 12-year-old worrying about his mom, this really sucked. I needed about a week to be healthy again and see my mom again. Finally, after being released from the hospital, We, of course, couldn't go back to our former home, so we had to search for even the worst apartment to live in. After some time, we found one, but it was kind of dirty, and there were some cockroaches, not too many, so it was okay. Finally, after 6 months, we were able to go back to our old home. My mom was too traumatized from the event, so we moved out a year later again, since it made her kind of paranoid living in the same house that almost killed us to where we currently live. Same town, though. My mom still has depressions because of this, but it's getting better. Sorry for any mistakes and shitty formulations I made. I'm really lazy right now, and English isn't my mother language. Please understand, edit. Thank for the replies, everyone. I hope you have a great day. Story 11, I lost my mother to cancer, and 2 weeks to the day later, lost my job of 10 years. I was a single mother with 2 daughters. I remember sitting there crying in front of the corporate lawyers, sobbing for my mom. I'm a little embarrassed for crying like that. But man, 2 of the most traumatizing things happened. So close was horrible. Story 12, spent 4 or 5 days walking around my empty house wondering where my kids were. Surprise divorce from my ex. She wouldn't take my calls, and she didn't leave a note. Her family wouldn't answer either. It was one thing in the midst of lots of bad stuff: difficult marriage, serious money problems, horrendous divorce, 2 years of contentious custody, her going to prison, tons of lawyers and court dates, but not knowing where my kids were changed me. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, my ex was unstable. I really did fear the worst. I kept walking around the empty rooms looking for them. The of knowing what really matters to you is never being able to think about anything else afterwards. Story 13, I was raped when I was 14 and contracted HPV. I was diagnosed with cervical cancer by the time I was 20. I had cryo treatments and laser treatments before my OBGYN had to remove about 45 of my cervix. I cannot have kids. My cervix would dilate too early to carry to full term. I never wanted kids in the first place. I'm nearly 28, and that feeling still hasn't changed. But it's one thing to decide it for yourself. It's another thing to be told you can't. Before I found So I've been on dates where once the guy found out I couldn't have kids, he actually left in the middle of the date. Just got up and left the table. Who does that? So I decided from then on I was just going to lay it all out. If you are okay with the truth of what comes with who I am, then great, date number 2. If not, nice to meet you. It's actually why date number 2 happened for me and my so. Story 14, my biological dad died in a car accident when I was 3. I wasn't really old enough to understand death, but it was there. I somehow just knew something was missing in my life. I met my stepfather when I was 7. We grew super close together. He married Mom, and I loved him because he was everything I had ever wanted. He died from cancer last Christmas Eve when I was 14. It's almost been exactly a year, and I still miss him very much. Story 15, being wrongfully accused of possessing child pornography. The process you go through from being accused to being acquitted, and honestly long after, is something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Edit for people asking how it happened. It'll give a short version. When I was in college, I had a part-time volunteer job, which involved talking to young teenagers who had trouble at home, helping them with homework, listen if they needed to talk, that kind of stuff. One girl who was 14 at the time, we'll call her Amanda, was being seriously neglected by her parents. She had developed some serious issues, and in hindsight should have been seeing a psychologist instead. I felt very bad for her, and tried to comfort and help her to the best of my abilities, which resulted in her getting very attached to me in a way that wasn't healthy, and in a way that I'd been warned about. I never did anything inappropriate, and eventually she turned 16 and was too old for the program. Long story short, she stalked me, kept coming to my door, ended up contacting my family members when I wouldn't respond to her calls. So I eventually told her we couldn't have contact anymore. In hindsight, I should have done this way earlier, which I regret to this day. She went crazy afterwards, threatened to tell everyone I'd molested her, which I ignored. 3 days later, 2 cops were knocking on my door with a search warrant, confiscated my phone and my laptop on the spot, which I didn't get returned for 4 months. She had told the cops that I possessed pictures of her naked from when she was 14. Legal age in my country is 15. She had shown them old texts that she had saved of me, saying I'd be there for her, etc., taken out of context, and made up a bunch of stories. Unfortunately, the police treats such allegations the same way they do with pedophilia accusations. My personal life was turned inside out. They went through my internet records, my computer, my phone, called 2 ex-girlfriends of mine who I had pictures of on my computer, asking how old they were at the time, if they'd given them to me voluntarily, and so on. I could write a book about the whole process, but the gist of it is, I was a complete wreck for those 6 months it took before I was officially acquitted and have developed huge trust issues. If you have any specific questions about it, I'll answer to the best of my abilities. Oh, and the girl faced no consequences for falsely accusing me, and later tried to contact me and threatened to commit suicide. I used that information to get a restraining order, which feels weird for a grown man to get when dealing with a now 20-year-old woman, but I've become paranoid, and I'm taking no chances. Story 16, it didn't happen to me, but it was still the worst thing you'll ever experience. Knock on, my friend's daughter dying. The girl's dad lost his during one of his visitation days, and Shook choked her and finally inflicted a bad enough head injury to cause her brain to swell. She passed out and never regained consciousness, and my friend made the decision to discontinue life support after a few days with no brain activity. She was 15 months old. Her death was the latest in a string of 6 for me in a 12-month period, and it really me up. No one should lose a child that way. No one should lose a child ever if the world were fair, but to lose one to violence, especially inflicted by a parent, no, just everything about that situation, worst thing ever. Edit, because apparently this is unclear. I'm friends with the mom, the dad. I don't feel a shred of pity for him. There are so many things that he could have done instead of what he did. On the bright side, my friend is now married with 2 beautiful little kids, and her husband is great. The kids, too. She's as happy as a person can be after experiencing such a thing. Overall, she's doing well. It's been very cathartic to see her getting her happiness. Was in an abusive relationship from the age of 15 until I was 18. The guy was seriously fed up. I was raped by someone I knew at 16. Boyfriend didn't believe me. Saw rapist 6 months later outside a shop. Boyfriend shook his hand and told me to kiss and make up. Had to hug rapist to avoid a beatdown out in the street. Got a beating when I got home. Lost 15 teeth in that relationship since the age of 16. I have false teeth. Yuck, many other horrible things, but that was the worst. Story 17, lost a child unexpectedly in the 2nd trimester. She would be 5 now. The miscarriage happened while my ex-husband was at work. I called him from the hospital, and he said he couldn't leave early because he had a big project. He showed up smelling like beer several hours later and refused to take the next day off to stay with me. Someone was supposed to stay with me. As they were worried I might have complications, I was too ashamed to call anyone, so I sat alone the next day, holding her teddy bear and crying. My mother-in-law told me not even 48 hours later that I needed to shut up and quit whining because it wasn't a real baby anyway, and I should try to get pregnant again. You can always make more. The complications resulting from her loss have left me largely infertile. I have since divorced and remarried, and even though we are excited to start the adoption process, there's still a part of me that aches for that little girl I never got to hold. I don't think I will ever stop aching for her. I'm sorry my body failed you. Anna, I will always love you. Story 18, a pseudo-ex-girlfriend died suddenly of either suicide or alcohol poisoning. Her family's not talking, but knows the official cause. We had a tumultuous, complicated relationship, and we're not talking when she died, but I at one point loved her a lot. Somewhere in my heart, I still loved her. Just before she died, a friend of hers suggested trying to make up with her and be friends again. I didn't take that chance because I thought she hated me. Turns out she never did. I spent years blaming myself for what happened to her. Story 19, I'm losing my vision due to degenerative myopia. Basically, I'm extremely nearsighted with extreme astigmatism, which has caused my eyes to morph into a football shape, and in doing so, the blood vessels within them have migrated to places where they shouldn't be. One leaked into the central part of my right eye and left retinal scarring that basically means my central vision in that eye is non-existent. I'm legally blind in my right eye, even with corrective lenses. My left eye is okay with glasses, but my doctor has said that he's seen lots of lesions and general weirdness in there, and chances are great that the same thing that happened to my right eye will happen to my left. So that's awesome. I'm 39, and I've gone to sea for almost 4 decades, though. So that's something. The scariest part is that I have a nonverbal autistic 5-year-old who required a lot of supervision and care, and the idea of facing that challenge while also blind is just, I can't really even think about it. Story 20, at 10 years old, I sat and watched as my parents screamed at each other. My mother violently attacked my father by punching him in the face and clawing at him, only to have my father take her purse, flip it upside down, and saw hundreds of pills pour out. She started grabbing them off the floor and shoving them in her mouth while my father tried to grab her from behind and hold her arms down. So she couldn't. She screamed in a fit of rage, then started punching herself in the face, full power, saying she hated herself and her life. They were shrieks of pure agony, like the sounds of an exorcism. They will forever haunt me after a short period that is blacked out in my mind. I remember my neighbors coming over to watch my younger sister, and as my dad took my mom and threw her in a mental institution. I didn't understand what was going on. It was traumatizing. I'm 34 now, and as much as I feel like it for feeling like this, I don't think I've ever moved past that night. Through the years, she has recovered, then gone back to drugs and so on and so forth. Due to her abuse, as an adult now, I've had to watch her physical health dramatically deteriorate over the years, and she just turned 60, major heart attacks, strokes, and she's had feet of intestines removed. I watched the war happen, and now I'm seeing the after effects. Go easy, guys, especially when kids are involved. Story 21. Sometimes it feels like the worst thing that happened to me was that nothing happened. I'm depressed for a long time in my young life, and there are those moments where I wish that something really bad had happened to me. So I do have a reason behind my depression. At the same time, I hate myself for my ignorance towards victims. Story 22. 2013 was the toughest year, not only for me, but my family. The highlight of the year was that I graduated high school beginning of summer, but it seemed like after that, my luck in life would take a downturn. That same summer, my mother was attacked, beaten in the head by a pipe while she was walking on her normal path as she does every day in our small town. The man who attacked her had actually killed a family friend of ours a year before, and his reason for the attack on my mother was because he wanted to kill again on the anniversary of his first murder. Luckily, she survived what the doctor said she had a 20 chance of doing and has made a strong recovery since, except for a lot of memory loss. Out of the bad stuff, right? Nope. My dad, who had to go through all of this with the person he loved most in this world, would be diagnosed with kidney cancer and lesions on his brain. Fortunately, the lesions were taken care of, and kidney cancer is quite treatable, but the irreparable damage such delivers on a person has made him a smaller and weaker man than he was before, although signs of improvement have been promising. I didn't mention it before, but after I graduated and before my mother was attacked, I snapped my arm in half during an ATV accident. Pretty brutal, and I have pictures if anyone's interested. It was my first broken bones and the only significant injury of my life so far. Edit, those were my parents on Dateline. Glad to hear people saw the episode. NBC people were really nice, BTW. Story 23. When I was 10, my cousin, who is a couple of years older than me, used the knowledge that I masturbate to blackmail me into doing stuff to him, ultimately raping me, repeatedly for months while I lived in his house. I'm a male. Story 24. This just happened last night this morning. Found out my boyfriend married another woman while still with me. We broke up approximately 11 hours ago. I found out from seeing a text message and using Facebook to find her, and lo and behold, my beautiful boyfriend and his beautiful bride happy in a wedding that happened in late August, early September this year. We were together for 5 years. He apparently met me after they broke up, and in 5 years met up with her again and rekindled without letting me know anything. I died about 82 times today. Edit, thank you to everyone and their kind words and private messages. Not one has been negative. To those who went through my history and told me I was insert adjective. Thank you. I've never felt so ugh in my life, and that little bit of superficialness from strangers gave me a little smile. I have friends who are checking in on me, and I'm finally going to attempt sleep since I woke up at 7 a.m. on Thursday. Cheers. Edit 2. Still receiving such supportive messages. I used to roll my eyes when I DC posts and edits like this, and now I get it. Thank you so much. This Reddit post is so therapeutic for me. Writing seems to let me look at this from a logical point of view. When I talk to my friends, it's all emotion, and my brain doesn't seem to want to work. I woke up this morning after finally getting some sleep. My God, was it difficult. I had to call my friend to get me through another horrifying breakdown. My poor and loyal dog stayed by my side until I was ready to take her out. I showered to get his smell off of me. In the shower we shared so many mornings and evenings in. I finally went outside, and it was sobering. The deliriousness wasn't there anymore, but the sadness was so real, so real. The times in between my weeping is getting longer and longer, but I can't wait until there is no more crying. Dad died when I was 19. Story 25. The third miscarriage was by far the worst that had ever happened to me. The first two were before I reached the 3 months mark, but this was almost at 4 months. I had already went for ultrasounds and everything was fine until my husband's birthday morning. When I woke up, I know something was up. A little later, the pain was unbearable, so I rushed to ER. There I had to lay on a stretcher on the hallway because the ER was full. It was super painful, and there was sadly nothing the doctors could do. They informed me I had already started the process of miscarrying, and there was nothing I or they could do. So there I was in front of lots of strangers. I wasn't the only one in the hallway losing my child, knowing it was dying inside me. And I couldn't do a thing. The worst was that I had to come back the next day for a DNC because they couldn't do it that day. So I had my dead baby inside me for a day. It was brutal. Story 26. My mom and I were in a car accident when I was 9, involving a tractor trailer and 2 other small cars. We were driving home around 8 p.m. from her office, driving a small, dark blue Toyota down I-75, light traffic. I had insisted we listen to Radio Disney, and I was leaning up against the window in the back seat, bored with the song that was playing. I saw it when it first happened. I knew something bad was about to happen, but I didn't know what. The front right corner of the tractor trailer hit the driver's side of the car, and after that everything was chaos. The trucker was trying to get into our lane, but didn't see us because our car was a dark color. He hit us, and we went spinning out of control. We went spinning across 5 lanes of traffic, hit the median, and somehow spun back out into the middle of the highway. We hit two other cars in the process, but the drivers were both okay, and their cars had minor damage. At some point, the police report told us we were completely underneath the tractor-trailer, and his back wheels went over our trunk at one point, right by my head. All of the glass in the car was totally shattered and all over the place. When we stopped spinning, one of the headlights was in my lap. My door, I was behind the driver, was completely peeled back. The car was completely totaled, bent into a shape that didn't resemble a car at all. I was small, so I was still in a car seat, and had I not been, I would have likely been thrown out of the car. Once the car stopped spinning, my mom immediately crawled out of the front seat and came to get me out. She was afraid that the car was going to catch fire or explode. She left the keys in the ignition. She was so frazzled, I was in shock and was covered in glass. She got me out and limped away from the car. All traffic had stopped, and a very nice trucker came up to us and offered to let us sit in his cab while we waited for the ambulance. The truck that hit us drove off, but later came back and turned himself in. My mom had called a church friend of hers to come to the hospital, and he sat with me in the ER while they took care of my mom elsewhere. I was strapped to a table because they thought I had a concussion and a broken hip. By the grace of God, my mom and I both survived something that should have killed us. She broke her ankle and had a huge bruise on her knee. I was covered in bruises, and we both had really bad whiplash. The only physical evidence that remains of the wreck for me is a scar on my finger where a piece of glass was stuck. I was still pulling out shards of glass from my hair months later. It may not be as bad as some of the other stories on here, but it was for me. It was a miracle we survived.